In a new opinion piece for CBSNews.com, the director of the vaccine delivery at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Dr. Orin Levine, shares the story of a Nigerian woman who walked miles to get her son a measles vaccine. And as the measles outbreak continues to plague the U.S., Dr. Levine says outbreaks aren't due to a lack of access to vaccines, as they are in countries like Nigeria, but are actually a result of a conscious decision against vaccination. And Dr. Orin Levine joins us now from Seattle. Doctor, first question, why do you think more and more parents are choosing not to vaccinate their kids?
Well, I think it's a decision that every parent takes, hopefully as informed as they can be, and with the intention of protecting their children as best they can. I think in today's environment, it's sometimes hard for people to get the information they want from the source that they trust. And I think that is manifesting itself right now as people hesitating to vaccinate their children, a consequence of which is the rise in measles cases that we're seeing right now.
So do you see any arguments on the anti-vaccine side that make sense?
Well, look, I'm not the best person to make the case against vaccines.
No, but I think But I think it's interesting to ask you, given your breadth of sort of being on the other. Sure. Is there anything the other side says that you're like, okay, that's a fair conversation we can have?
I think the most important part about the conversation that I really want to try and encourage is that we, first of all, get past the confrontation and arguing against each other in an irrational way. And secondly, that we look for what are those trusted sources of information that everybody can go to get the facts that they need and to hear it from a source that they trust. I worry that right now we have a breakdown in trust that is underlying the problem. The facts haven't changed. Vaccines are safe, efficacious, and the best way to prevent measles. But I think the trust that people have in the sources that they're getting information from is really one of the challenges we're facing today.
So, Doctor, when you have a conversation with someone who is against vaccines, is there one thing that you say to them, listen, I know your side believes this? Is there one point they make that you're the most passionate in dispelling, so to speak, based on fact?
Yeah, I think the part about the conversation that I typically have is really the part that challenges me about seeing cases of measles in the U.S. is the fact that the work I do is usually overseas in places where measles is still rampant and taking the lives of children all the time. I encountered parents who don't hesitate to vaccinate their kids. They go extra distances. A few years ago in northern Nigeria, I was in a clinic where this woman had carried her malnourished baby several miles to get to this measles clinic and insisted, I'm not leaving until I get this kid vaccinated. And somehow I just wish that parent's kind of experience with measles could get into the conversation so that parents who are hesitating and wondering about, well, is this really going to be something to worry about, that they could hear directly from them.
All right. So in your piece, you mentioned vaccinating kids is a collective responsibility. Explain what you mean.
Well, the thing about vaccines is they're the best way to protect our kids safely and effectively against diseases. But they also protect our communities. There are people for whom vaccines don't work as well. A person who has an underlying immune system problem or who may be taking the kind of medications that you sometimes get when you're treated with cancer that suppress your immune system, they count on the rest of us to be protected from the disease so that the germ can't find them. And that's the collective responsibility that I think we should all own.
You talk about the facts alone not being enough to change minds. So what is the best strategy, right? We hear from somebody like you, and so far you haven't really answered the question I asked of, does the other side have any legitimate argument that sort of is the one you want to argue with them on? But in telling the story about the mother in Africa, that's a powerful story, right? A real world story that we can all get behind. So what do you do? If facts are not enough, then how do you change people's minds?
So I don't have a great answer to that. I think that the facts have stayed the same, and yet we've seen people's views on vaccines change, which suggests to me that it's not the facts. It's somehow the source of that information is not convincing them. It's somehow the conversation is getting polarized and they're shutting down the the information or messages that other people are trying to convey to them. And so my plea is for civility and actually us trying to reach across and understand where that other person is coming from and what they need in order to hear the facts or to hear from a trusted person to be able to maybe make a different decision and not hesitate to vaccinate their kid.
Have you ever, doctor, had a conversation with a mother who passionately believes that her child was injured by a vaccine and doesn't want any of her other kids to be vaccinated?
Yeah, I've actually I've been pretty impressed with some of the people who are really concerned about making sure that vaccines are as safe as possible. And some of those people have these great stories. There was a gentleman who I used to talk with who had a child who was harmed by polio vaccine, and then basically became one of the advocates for making sure that polio vaccines were as safe as possible. He wasn't rejecting the basis of vaccination. He was an advocate for the safest possible vaccines. And I think, I'm in complete alignment with those people and want vaccines to be as safe as possible, just like they do.
Is it your opinion that a measles vaccine is the answer to outbreaks?
Yeah, there's no question that the safest thing that you can do to protect your child against measles is to vaccinate them.
And listen, if there are people who are going to watch this who heard from whatever source that they're reading that, a shot for the measles will get your kids sick, or you might have, let's set the record straight based on who you are, what you know, what your training is. Will a child get sick if they get vaccinated for measles?
The measles vaccine is not going to make the child sick. The measles vaccine is going to protect them from measles.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the best we can do is get a doctor who's got the training, who has first real world experience to come on here and talk about it. So obviously it's up to the parents to decide. That's a freedom we enjoy in this country. But Dr. Orin Levine serving it up pretty straightforward. Thank you, Doc.
Pleasure.